your masks off?
You are.
We're not standing next to you.
Well, welcome everybody, online and in person, to the opening of our Faces of the Cathedral portrait exhibition in Delbridge Hall. Gather with a very small group of select people, of artists, and we are going to have a walk around the exhibition. Those who were at the Cathedral this morning would have heard me say, if we are made in the image of God, the challenge is to look for God in each portrait. I'll say that again. If we are made in the image of God, we all contain something of the essence and spirit of God, then the challenge is to look for God in each portrait. Today we come to open an art exhibition, but a particular one which features local artists. Most who have some connection with the Cathedral community. Most people who have a spark of faith in the Creator God, expressing themselves in a visual way. Over the next month or so, we're going to spend time with this artwork in many different ways. There will be some quiet afternoons to sit with the art and let it speak to us and to respond creatively. There will be a movement, storytelling workshop where we will listen and watch and respond to the art in story, movement and song. There will be the opportunity just to walk around. And there are workshops where we will create portraits with colour, in a Picasso-like way. There will also be tours of our stained glass windows where we'll hear some of the stories of those portraits in art. But today we launch this exhibition, this Faces of the Cathedral exhibition of portraits of many sorts. What I'm going to do is to invite some of the artists to say a few words about their works. But before I do that, I want to also show you our Living Stones exhibition, the people of St Paul's Cathedral, which has been put together mostly by Jan Down, with many of the photographs by Christine Morris. This Living Stones exhibition tells stories of this community here in Salem. There are word portraits and there are visual images. I particularly like the fact that our cat, Annie, features in the exhibition. And as I said this morning to the children, if we look at this Living Stones exhibition, where do we see God? What do we learn of the people who are part of St Paul's Cathedral community? We read stories about what nourishes and inspires people, particularly in gathering for prayer and worship. There are many photos of food. Food is an important part of this community. Food for the soul as well as food for the body. Prayer is an important part of this community. Beauty is an important part of this community. And soul. There's also dance. There's also mowing the lawn and digging the garden and taking food to those in need. Such a rich, diverse community of faith. So I invite you to come and spend time with this Living Stones exhibition. I'm going to ask Jan whether she has a few words she would like to say about what she would like from this Living Stones exhibition. Can you come over here?
It's really about saying that the church is people and a community. And what I hope is that when visitors come to the cathedral, that's what they will see. They won't only see a beautiful building with beautiful windows. They'll see that it is the people, that it is a community. So we are the living stones that make up this church.
Thank you. So we begin our exhibition with a collage, really. A collage of images from the stained glass windows in the cathedral, put together by Christine Morris, which involved a number of hours climbing a ladder, taking photographs, looking at the computer, and I invite you to have a look at this image, which, like our Living Stones exhibition, is a composite of characters. And you might like to have a look in the cathedral and see if you can find them all. We might have a prize for the person that can find all the people. Christine, is there anything you would like to say? No. Thank you. And then we move on, no particular order, but we have 3 works of art by Flack, which tells something of her story using different mediums. Claire, would you like to say a few words?
They start from a mental health point of view of well-being. They like all the hurt and the pain that I've been through, and the challenges and trials, and it's actually God has pictured me in shapes and forms to picture all these feelings and thoughts and put it into an actual pattern. As we're all linked, and that's what all these represent at the top. Every single person is linked somehow to the world and to each other. We're all part of the big picture. Every single person is included. Right? And it's all about overcoming and receiving. So you releasing the old and all, which is this one, releasing all the old and all the pain and the hurt, overcoming it to a new creation, which is this one, and living in the new. All the brightness and the joy of the day.
Whoa, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing us that story and yourself. Jenny Batten has given us 2 different works. Would you like to say a few words about the first one? Moods in Perspective.
Ooh, well, what I love about this, creating this portrait of Peter, who's over there, is that I was able to capture 2 different moods just by using colour and abstract and shape, which I love about the Picasso Cubist style of art. And so, yes, I wonder if you can see the 2 different moods.
Peter, can you go and stand by it so we can have a look at it?
Just see if we can
compare and contrast.
Glasses off.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, I can see that for sure.
Thank you. And Rita has brought us a work in fabric, in embroidery. Thank you, Rita. If you could come up there.
If it would be out of your
way.
way,
That's it.
This is better.
Just come up closer so we can see you with the art.
Okay. I had to write a couple of little notes because I only knew I was doing it. a little while ago.
Turn around and face the camera.
All right. This is St. Francis, of Assisi, who was born 8 centuries ago in a little hill town in Italy. He was thought of as poverello, the little poor man. He didn't like school. He had to go to school. He had to work with his father, who, in a business which I probably would say would be retail business today. And he taught Francis to do the accounting and do all sorts of other things in this shop. He didn't like that either. He wanted to be outside. So he was visiting someone one day, and a light came to him. Oh, and before that happened, he was a real boy about town. He was exciting and a bit naughty and all sorts of things, and drank a lot of wine and had a wonderful time. And when he was 22, he was walking. I don't know whether he was walking or riding a horse. I really don't know what he was doing. I thought it was a horse. And he saw a leper, and he thought he'd give him money because he had plenty. He gave his money away to everybody, gave rich things to everybody because he didn't have any care for it. And he looked at the leper, and he saw this white light, and he hopped off his horse and went over to the leper and kissed him and took him with him to help him, to give him shelter, to do what he wanted to do to help. Now, time went by, and 3 or 4 other men joined Francis to look after the lepers and in a colony. And that was the beginning of the Franciscan friars. And I think that, yes, I can move on to the all right, so when they called him the little poor man, he was so rich in the things of spirit. He was known for his holy, simple life and his preaching to the birds and the gentleness to the natural world. In fact, he tamed a wolf with gentleness. Now, the portrait, this is a portrait. It's not just a face. Portraits, the artist has to bring out everything that the artist knows and likes about the sitter. And I have tried to do that. I have tried to look, I've made his face serious because by this time, although he was very happy in his poverty, he took everything he did very seriously, and talking about the words of God were everything to him, and looking after the poor. You'll find a stigmata on his hands and feet, and that references the pain and the wounds of Christ at the crucifixion. He's holding his Bible in one hand, and that's the stories. They're the stories he's telling and preaching about to these people. I've tried to, because it isn't just the face that has to show, I believe. I think that the body language and the whole stature of the person is embodied in the face, and I think that we have to have a look at that. I have endeavoured on the embroidered parts to give movement to his robe, and he wears his girdle, and I haven't found out yet why priests wear girdles, besides keeping their tunics up. I don't know. However, they do, and this is I liked it knotted. I did try it with just a knot at the bottom, but it didn't look right, and I thought, no, I'll put knots in it. I think that would look much better, and I think it does. And he has bare feet. He didn't wear shoes. He wore bare feet, and he lived in joyful poverty and humility. He was well loved in his time and mourned throughout Italy when he died. And I think I have probably covered. Oh, what I've done to his background, it depends, I think, on the kind of portrait that you want to make or that you're looking at. And if you can get over to the gallery, you'll find 52 works over there, most of them different. And it's quite extraordinary to see so many different portraits. So I like things to be natural where possible, and the background on this is a natural linen. His robe I'm not sure about. I think it's cotton, but I think there's an additive to it. So that's...
Thank you, Rita. Wow. See what I mean? There's so much depth to each of these pieces. Over here behind Claire, this is a piece created by Julie Milkey, entitled Wonder. It's a portrait of your niece.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's just self-explanatory, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just
beautiful.
Just the wonder of bubbles.
Yeah. Ah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to spend time with that. Okay, now we'll go around the corner. This work is by Anne Miller, the public face of the cathedral. Thank you, Anne.
I think if you asked anybody in town who were Susanna and Nikolai, that you would get 100 different answers. Oh, she's the lady that organised the get-together when there was that terrible bombing in New Zealand. Oh, I met Nikolai at the Philosophy Club. Oh, no, he's the police chaplain. There's just so much to what they've done in the last 2 years. And although it's not strictly a portrait, it's the story of what I've enjoyed of what they've done over the last 5 years, expressed symbolically. So.
And next we have a work by Peter Batten, who is more than a photographer, more than an artist, but you may like to share us a little what brought you to that work, Peter.
Faces on a Page is a representation of a self-portrait. I'm normally not into taking selfies, but I was challenged to do this on this occasion. And it reminded me of a representation of the stories that make us and shape us in mind, body and spirit. And we all carry those stories within us, and occasionally we get a chance to share those stories. Sometimes we don't get a chance to share those stories, but they are always there with us and they shape us to who we are. So this is a representation called Faces on a Page, and the page is the representation of those stories that we carry within. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Peter. We now have Jenny's second piece. Jenny Batten. Thank you. Go, Jenny.
Okay. One thing I've discovered about myself as I grow older is that I'm discovering an inner world, and in this portrait I talk about my inner creative world that inspires and encourages spiritual practice. And spiritual practice that I have been developing is that of mandalas, and hidden inside my portrait are some photographs of mandalas that I've created, and I've shrunk them up really small. So you might like to gaze upon this and see how many you can find. But, you know, as a child I was encouraged to be creative, but it was always the practical things, you know, like knitting and sewing and cooking and gardening and yes, you know, I've discovered something else about being a creative person and a spiritual practice at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Kate.
A very important part of my life is prayer, and I discovered many years ago that stitching is often prayer for me. And this is a a very small portraiture of some things that I have stitched for people telling other people's stories. There are actually mistakes in there where I've had to try again and see what else might work better, and other things that I pre-stitched and they worked, so I knew I could produce it on the article appropriately. Well, it's just this, and I love colour, and I just love playing with it all, and I love the meditation in it all, in that process. So it's just a small sample. There's another big box at home.
Some of your story, Kate.
And it's my story, yeah. They've become part of my story because I have that joy of privilege of hearing people's stories and coming up with images for them.
Thank you. This work here is by Coral Minster. It's called The Rose and the Cross. Now, Coral has an exhibition at the moment at Bryagalong, and so she's there right now and unable to be with us. But this work says a lot, I think, and I look forward to spending time with it over the next little while. The rose and the cross. With such depth, such softness, such strength, you know, and the vertical and the horizontal dimension. And last but not least, a second work by Julie Milkey. Tell us about this one, Julie.
This is my personal colour portrait. I've been painting very bright paintings for a long time now, and I put this together when we were talking about having this exhibition, and I jokingly sent a bit of a blurb to Susanna and said, "This is my portrait, my self-portrait," and she took me seriously and said, "Okay." So now that's why it's here. It's the colours I love, but I love all colours. So yes, there's a few in the series of my personal colour portraits.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all the artists who have spoken and who have contributed to this exhibition. Thank you for the inspiration that you are to me. You know, I was in tears this morning looking at these people, and I've been very emotional looking at these works of art, because when I see art, when I go to the gallery, when I come to this gallery, I'm seeing the more. It's not just the first thing my eye lights upon, but it's spending time with it, going deeper. And my faith is in the Trinitarian God who is creator. And so whenever I'm in a gallery, I have a sense of spirit, of God's spirit, you know, of life. I mean, that's the same in the bush and in gardens.
Yeah.
But also, I think those who paint, those who sculpt, those who take photography are channeling spirit and life. That's my experience. So come and enjoy it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.